ideas. And then during acupuncture school, I learned about foreign medical schools, and I ended up going to the Caribbean, to Grenada. Some of you that are in my generation may remember that we invaded Grenada when Reagan was president, and I was there at that time. But while I was living there, I lived with a Grenadian family who was interested in preserving the local culture, and they were very interested in traditional healing practices. So another experience was actually doing a mini mentorship with a couple of different, as they call them, their bush doctors, and bush meaning literally bushes and herbal medicine. So that was another interesting little side note. And then when I got into UCLA, which is where I graduated from, it turns out that there was a guy there by the name of Norman Cousins, who was an author, and he was also the chairman of the Department of Psychoneuroimmunology, which at that time was a fancy way of saying holistic medicine. So just sort of all these serendipitous things happened, and I got very interested in holistic medicine. I'm now on faculty with the Institute for Functional Medicine, and I teach for them. So with that background, tonight we're going to talk about, this is actually a presentation I give at IFM, but I took about 2/3 of the slides out of it because I want lots of time for questions. So we're going to talk about Lyme biology, and then we're going to talk about this program we have, which is just a tiny piece of the treatment for any chronic disease called Rebalance to Heal. And somehow I can get my slides to move, I'm hoping. There we go. So this is just a pretty picture. This is an atomic force micrograph of a Borrelia biofilm. So there's a biofilm of Borrelia. That's the thing that we all strive to overturn. And so the question becomes, how do you deal with this crazy bug? Well, you got to deal with the terrain, and that's really you. The truth is, most people who get Lyme disease seem to fight it off with no help at all. So if that's true, what's unique and different about those of us who get chronic Lyme disease? And that really boils down to dealing with the exposome, because that can alter your phenotype. Your genes are not your destiny, but your genes are kind of a signpost. So we need to look at the external exposome, things like your lifestyle, air, water, food pollution, medications, environmental toxins, xenobiotics. Internal exposome, your metabolic byproducts like lipid peroxides, oxidative stress, protein adducts, inflammation, blah, blah, blah. And then cognitive, and that's where the Rebalance to Heal comes in, your thoughts, beliefs, fears, phobias, isolation, stressors, etc. And then you have to obviously deal with the pathogen, but it's not enough to just say, oh, it's a bug, kill it with antibiotics. We need to understand the biology of the bug and understand the pathophysiology of the bug. And we're going to talk tonight about this idea of stealth pathology, cooperation, biofilm production, interactions with our own immune system. And remembering that this is all about chronic, not acute. If you've got meningitis, get on antibiotics right now, right? But we're talking about chronic infection, so a little different deal. So how do I do that? Well, got to obtain a really detailed history framed around the question, when is the last time you were truly well? I like to think of sort of a timeline, and the line is, horizontal when your health is normal, but then it breaks. And the question is right there where it broke, what happened? What was unique and what was different? And we're looking for clues about antecedents, meaning predisposing factors, triggering events, which in the case of Lyme disease is often a tick bite, and then mediators, which are sort of biochemical processes that either help you get better or keep you sick. Then we're going to do a comprehensive physical exam, where again, we're looking for these ATMs, and then we're going to create this detailed timeline, because the time sequence of how things happen is really important. And for some reason weird feedback. I think somebody maybe is not on mute. And then we need to create, isolate the ideas that the patient comes with. Everybody, all of you have had, 102 diagnoses over the years, right? You were told you had seronegative rheumatoid arthritis. You were told you had fibromyalgia. You were told you had chronic fatigue. You were told you were just nuts. and, it was just in your head and yada, yada. Well, we need to either do tests or do consults to either rule that stuff in or rule that out. And I always like to tell my patients, well, you may well be crazy, but that's a separate issue, right? It's the fact that you have chronic Lyme isn't the crazy part, or maybe that is the crazy part because people make you feel crazy. And then we populate a matrix, and this is what the functional medicine matrix looks like. So here are our antecedents, triggers, and mediators. And then in the middle are these physiological domains of assimilation, which is getting stuff into your body, digestion, breathing, things like that. Defense and repair, which is really immune system. Energy production, so how your mitochondria work and you make energy. Biotransformation and elimination, that's detoxification. Transport, moving stuff around, but not just blood and lymph. There's a cell in your body at the base of your spinal column that has what's called an axon that goes all the way to your big toe. That axon is a couple feet long. And how do you get stuff from the body of that neuron all the way down to the end of the axon? That's transport. Communication is, hormones, neurotransmitters, molecules of emotion, messenger molecules of all kinds. Structure is everything from how well do your cell membranes and intracellular membranes work, and all the way up to muscles and joints. And then along the bottom, these modifiable lifestyle factors, sleep and exercise, nourishment, stress, and relationships. And then on top of that, we layer this biology and pathophysiology. So we need to understand something about the viral or bacterial phenotypic resistance. That's the ability of the bug to simply evade antibiotics and or your immune system, not by genetic resistance, which is what doctors usually talk about when they say, well, the bacteria is resistant to the antibiotics. We're talking about something completely different, phenotypic resistance. And then pathogen influences on the host immunity. The way the immune system interacts with the bug makes a difference on whether or not you get chronic illness or you clear the illness. And then and that's really goes to the next one, this Th1 versus Th2, which are just types of T helper cells and which one is dominant in the individual. Then the genetic variability and susceptibility. And then finally, we all have these these viruses that live in our bodies, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes simplex viruses, cytomegaloviruses, and so on. And when our immune system kind of gets beat down by being chronically unwell, these can bloom. And that, of course, makes the whole picture more complicated. And then there's an axiom in functional medicine which states that unless there's a compelling reason to do otherwise, you really should start in the gut. And there are several reasons for that. One is 70% of your immune system lines your gut. But the other reason is because baseline nutritional deficiencies or other antecedents or triggers, right, those things that we talked about before, can lead to increased baseline oxidative stress, impaired immune function, impaired mucosal defenses, right? The mucosa is the lining of the gut, and that's really where most things enter the body. And that can result in facilitation of viral mutations and viral replication. That can increase susceptibility to infection. That can result in increased frequency, severity, duration of infection. And then you get into a situation where you start amplification loops where all of these problems get bigger and our ability to solve them gets smaller. So that's really why we want to start in the gut. And then people always, when can I start treatment? How do I start? Do I really have to get that final diagnosis nailed down? Do I have to know if it's Lyme or Babesia or Bartonella or, whatever, 100 different things that we're going to talk about in a minute? Well, to just dumb down functional medicine for a minute, it's not a protocol. It's not, oh, here's my sheet of paper and this is how I treat Lyme. It's we assess your diet and your dietary needs. We assess that area of assimilation and energy and transport and, mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness and sleep and all these things. So there's like 19 areas there. And the total number of possible keys, as they're called in mathematics, is 4 to the 19th power, which ends up making your intervention unique on Earth. It's just for you. And that's how functional medicine is different. We shore up your physiology to make hopefully your level of wellness rise to the point where disease can't flourish. Just like that majority of people who get Lyme, who seem to fight it off on their own, how can we get your physiology to the point where you can fight it off on your own? And then, of course, we layer on top of that treatment for the Lyme itself, or the, tick-borne illness itself. So, but I want to back up and talk about evidence-based medicine for a minute, because, we're all being told that all this nonsense about chronic Lyme, it's not evidence-based and yada, yada. Well, the original idea of evidence-based medicine was really the best research intersecting with the patient's preference, intersecting with the clinician's experience. And that, that where all of those circles intertwine right in here seems like a really good idea. But then evidence-based medicine should de-emphasize intuition, unsystematic clinical experience, and pathophysiologic rationale as sufficient grounds for clinical decision-making. So in one fell swoop, we knock out clinical experience and we knock out patient preference. And then this guy comes along, Dr. Ioannidis at Stanford University, and he says, well, gee whiz, there is an increasing concern that most current published research findings are false. Not some, most. And simulations show that for most study designs and settings, it's more likely that the research claim will be false than positive. And moreover, most of the time, it's simply an accurate measure of prevailing bias. So then there's this article in the Mayo Clinic Proceedings. The reversal of established medical practice is common and occurs across all classes of medical practice. In other words, established, this is what we should do for this disease for sure, is suddenly overturned. And in fact, in the same issue of the Proceedings, Dr. Ioannidis again said that it turns out that about half of what doctors do, there isn't evidence for it. So, everybody running around saying evidence-based medicine, evidence-based medicine. Well, half of what they do doesn't have enough evidence to truly support it. So we need to not be so critical. And what about the Infectious Disease Society of America? Because I'm sure many of you have come up against this issue. In the Infectious Disease Society of America, the dominant medical society for the treatment of infectious disease, has protocols out for treating Lyme. But the Infectious Disease Society of America, more than half of the current recommendations from the IDSA are based on level 3 evidence only. Level 3 evidence is opinion. Until more well-designed studies are available, physicians should be cautious when using these guidelines as the sole decision-making tool. So again, evidence. And then my favorite article in all of medicine, parachute used to prevent death and major trauma related to gravitational challenge, a systematic review of randomized controlled trials. And unfortunately, there are no randomized trials of the use of parachutes. And they conclude that with many interventions intended to prevent ill health, the effectiveness of parachutes has not been subjected to rigorous evaluation by randomized controlled trials. Advocates of evidence-based medicine have criticized the adoption of interventions evaluated by using only observational data. And then the authors go on to say that we think that everyone might benefit if the most radical protagonists of evidence-based medicine organize and participate in a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, crossover design trial of parachutes. And what that means is the first time you go up in the airplane, half the people have a parachute and the other half don't, and you jump out and you see what happens. And then you go up in the airplane again, and the people who had parachutes the first time don't get them and they jump out again. So it's a way to cull the herd pretty quickly of these radical protagonists. So where do we sit with evidence-based medicine at this point? And it's right here. And so in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. And that's where we sit in the treatment of chronic Lyme today. So let's jump into the infectious disease conundrum. And let me see how long that preamble took me there. Okay. So we talked about this, right? These various areas that the bug can hide itself. And just to make it clear that this isn't unique to Lyme at all, this paper, why is long-term therapy required for tuberculosis? Well, here's a glossary from this paper. Antibiotic indifference. This just means that the bug doesn't care about your antibiotic. It just doesn't care. Biofilm formation. So bugs can form or they can join biofilms. And biofilms are really interesting because you've got, I like to think of it as fruit cocktail jello. Being a good Minnesotan, you all should know what that is. And each type of fruit in the fruit cocktail jello is a different bug. Now, let's say that those little gray grapes that are in the fruit cocktail, the canned fruit cocktail, those little gray grapes can make penicillinase. And they can elaborate a cloud of penicillinase into the jello. And so now when penicillin tries to get into the jello, the penicillinase breaks it down. And so all of the bacteria hiding in this biofilm are saved, right? And then there's this idea of dormancy. So we hear about this a lot in latency and persister forms. So, we know that the Borrelia is a spirochete, but it can lose its cell wall and become an L form or a cell wall deficient form. And by the way, some antibiotics work by killing the cell wall. Well, when this particular bug is exposed to ampicillin, as an example, it just lets go of its cell wall and goes on its merry way, being an L form or a cell wall deficient form. And it can also, I like to think of those of grapes again. The cell wall deficient forms are grapes, and then they can shrink into raisins, and those are the cysts. And then there's this idea of phenotypic antibiotic resistance, which we talked about. And the interesting thing is that this phenomenon is common to all bacteria, and these resistant populations may enrich under various conditions, like being exposed to antibiotics or being exposed to an immune response or whatever. So we've covered this actually. This is the viral and bacterial phenotypic resistance, the pathogen influences on the immune system. And remember that the tick has immune suppressants in its saliva, so it aids and abets the pathogen getting into us. And then the pathogen can actually infect white blood cells. It can go intracellular into white blood cells and act as Trojan horses. And that's actually how it crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets into our brain. So, to the extent that you have spirochetes in your brain, it's true that it's in your head, right? And then host immune response. However, do you have a delayed type hypersensitivity reaction, which generally leads to the extinguishing of the illness, curing it, versus a humoral response, a strong humoral response without a delayed type hypersensitivity response will lead to chronic illness. And then finally, genetic variations, which has to do with your HLA type. That's like, tissue typing. We measure HLA type to see if you're genetically susceptible to, say, celiac disease, toll-like receptors, all these fancy things, microRNA environments, and so on. And then this cascade of chronic dormant infections, blooming. A lot of people will come to me and they'll say, well, I was told I have Epstein-Barr, or I was told I have varicella or, cytomegalovirus. And yeah, indeed they do, but it's because they have some tick-borne illness or some mold illness that has suppressed their immune system to the point where these endogenous viruses simply bloom. And it just complicates the clinical picture, makes it hard to figure out which way is up. So here's our buddy, Lyme. And it's not just Borrelia burgdorferi anymore. Here on the left, 6 species of Borrelia that are known to cause Lyme-like symptoms. On the right, we've got 3 Borrelia species that are related to tick-borne relapsing fever. We've got this myomotoi, which is related to tick-borne relapsing fever, but it's on its own. And then there are other species of Borrelia which are also symptom-causing. And then we've got co-infections, a couple of species of Babesia, several species of Bartonella, human granulocytic anaplasma, human monocytic ehrlichiosis, and rickettsia, and others. And then we also have imitators. So some of these are viruses, some of them are bacteria, some of them are tick-borne, some of them are mosquito-borne. and some are just not infectious agents at all. So Powassan virus, tick-borne encephalitis virus, West Nile virus, and then things like mycoplasma, which is a bacteria that's kind of hard to kill, or cytomegalovirus or Epstein-Barr. We've talked about all the herpes simplex viruses, parvoviruses, and then this symptomatically related but distinctly different condition known as pandas, which is a staphylococcal A issue. And then there's this really interesting alpha-gal issue. So alpha-gal is not the dominant female. Alpha-gal is a sugar, it's a carbohydrate. And it is in the saliva of primarily the lone star tick, but probably others. And it can cause you to have red meat allergy. So especially in adults, if they suddenly have red meat allergy, they probably have alpha-gal syndrome. And this can cause anaphylaxis, which means a life-threatening allergic reaction. So there's lots of stuff that can be going on with those fuzzy little cute ticks. Now, I want you to understand that I understand what the dominant medical model advises. I took the IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, CME. I got 100% on the pre-test, 100% on the post-test. I did all 6 cases. You only had to do 4 to get the CME. I just disagree with them, and I'm going to explain why. You thought you had Lyme disease for a long time, but this ice mummy found Idsa, found in the Eastern Alps, seems to have had it for 5,000 years. So this is not a new disease. So really, this is more evidence. We have to ask ourselves, what's happening to us that's making this chronic disease? Why aren't we fighting this off like a lot of people do? And that comes back to the whole functional medicine model. And let's find out how you're unique in the world. There are 30,000 cases, more or less, reported to the CDC every year. The CDC itself estimates that it's underreported by 10 times. So there are probably 300,000 cases of Lyme every year in the US. Just as a comparison, that's similar to the amount of invasive breast cancer. It's more than prostate cancer, more than rheumatoid arthritis, colon cancer, Parkinson's, type 1 diabetes, HIV, multiple sclerosis, or West Nile virus. And yet, per US patient, per new case in the United States, malaria gets about $118,000 of research money from the NIH per new case per year. West Nile, about $13,000 per case. Lyme disease, $82. Not 8,200, not 82,000, 82. So I think there's an underappreciation of the problem, and there's an underappreciation and it's just under-researched. This is a map of the United States. I'm sure you all know that it's in every state. I want to call attention to Florida down here. Well, you probably know where Florida is. Reported cases, 2,327. Now, by the CDC's own estimate, there's probably actually around 20,000 cases in Florida, right? Remember that number because we're going to talk about it again in a minute. So this is the Infectious Disease Society of America Lyme guidelines. And they say that if you have the Lyme rash, the erythema migrans rash, that's all you need for diagnosis, just treat it. But if you have joint pains and muscle pains and brain fog and extreme fatigue and even psychosis, that doesn't count, and it's not, you got to have a test for that. But let's look at these guidelines. Now, these are the IDSA Lyme specific guidelines. 55% of them are level 3 evidence. Level 3 evidence, again, opinion. So that's their opinion. And we already talked about the, opinion is probably just a confirmation of the prevailing bias, right? We talked a little bit about stealth pathology. I want to go into the stealth pathology of the bug. There are 4 main strategies the bug uses to evade the immune system: immunosuppression, genetic phase and antigenic variation, physical seclusion, and secreted factors. Again, the bug, the Borrelia, or whatever it is, Bartonella, whatever it is aided and abetted by this little fuzzy, warm and fuzzy creature, this Lyme bug. You know, I'm an outdoorsman. I used to just walk through the woods with absolute impunity. And then I started treating people with Lyme disease. And now I'm like Tinkerbell out there. You know, I hop from rock to rock, trying not to touch anything because it's a scary world. I mean, it's terrifying. These little guys, you know, they embed, they feed on us, which is bad enough all by itself, but then they secrete anticoagulants, analgesics, and immunosuppressant factors, and then they barf into that wound, and all of the bugs in their hindgut come into the wound. And then Borrelia gets in there. And again, just to show that Borrelia isn't really unique, it's just using things that other bugs know how to do too, like gene switching in a way similar to trypanosomes, which means syphilis, or mutation and recombination like AIDS, or variability of the antigen expression like a bacteria called Neisseria, or autoinduction of dormant organisms. That's going from the cyst and waiting around until you stop taking your antibiotics and then auto-resuscitating yourself and coming back like TB does, tuberculosis, or binding and hiding behind other proteins in our body like staph and strep do. So here's just a little cartoon of the two cell bodies here. Let me point to them, two cell bodies here, and then this fibronectin, and the bug can hide behind that. And if your immune system is looking around over here, can't see it. I wanted to put a Klingon warship decloaking here, but it turns out there's a copyright issue with that, so I couldn't. So Borrelia burgdorferi also has these secreted factors. It can secrete something called adherin, which allows it to adhere to cells, and porin, which allows it to bore a hole in the cell and get inside. And then this quorum sensing idea where it can go dormant in these cyst forms and then auto-resuscitate later. I don't know if you can hear that barking in the background. I have two Newfoundlands and apparently they want to go outside. And this is just a recap. The Borrelia burgdorferi can actively suppress our immune system, and it can evade our immune system by these various things. And then we talk a lot about these different forms, right? There's the spirochete, there's a cell wall deficient form, also called an L form, and there may be hundreds of those. And then cyst forms and biofilms. And we think, well, how can this bug change shapes? It's some kind of a weird shapeshifter. It's very weird. It's just like this, right? It's not unusual in nature at all. So this bug is very clever, but it's not that clever. It's just, we haven't recognized that it's clever. So here's some more of our friends. Here's some biofilms, 2-day-old biofilm in the first column here. The middle column is 3 to 6 days old, and then 7 to 21-day-old biofilms. And you can see under different, the top row is one kind of stain, the middle row is a different stain, the third row is a fluorescent stain. You can just see in the fluorescent stain, you can see these little dots and lines. The lines are the spirochetes, the dots are really the cell wall deficient forms, and the tiniest dots are cysts. And just an aside on biofilms. Biofilms are just another way bacteria live. They're not sinister in and of themselves. It's the composition of the biofilm that makes it either probiotic or pathogenic. And in fact, our gut is lined with a probiotic biofilm about 50 microns thick, so less than a hairbreadth thick, that is actually part of the barrier function of the gut. They're very important. It's part of our microbiome. But we need to make the biofilm more permeable so that the immune system stuff can get in there and the antibiotics can get in there, or antimicrobial herbs. So we can do that with lactoferrin. That's a supplement you can get. It's a colostrum extract or colostrum itself, or you can use serum-derived bovine immune globulins, or you can use probiotics, believe it or not, and even prebiotics. And then you can also use enzymes, which help break down the matrix. You can use xylitol, you can use EDTA. EDTA is actually really strong. And I sometimes even use intravenous EDTA called chelation therapy to help Lyme patients with biofilm issues. And then stevia, I thought I said that, but maybe I didn't. Now, we have this great test, right? And it should be no problem. You just get a test and you find out if you have Lyme disease. Well, these are all studies along this column here. These are different studies that have been done on the commercially available two-tiered test. Totals at the bottom. So they looked at, in total, over 1,000 people. And we looked at the sensitivity. That means, sensitivity means, if you get the test, how likely is it that if you have it, it'll be positive? Well, 46%. That means that roughly half of people who get this test will have a false negative. How specific is it? Well, it's really specific. It's awesome. It's 99% specific. So it's a great test for surveillance. It's a great test for research studies where you only want to include people who absolutely have it. But it's a terrible test for diagnosing people with Lyme. You know, in med school, we learned about appendicitis, right? Well, now in those days, I'm from the Paleolithic area. I got out of med school in the 80s. But then we didn't have CT scanners and ultrasounds and all these amazing things. Now I carry around an ultrasound with me in the clinic. But in those days, we were told, look, if you're not taking out 30% normal appendices, you're missing some. You got to take out all of the ones that might be, because the risk of not treating an appendicitis is that people die, right? Well, the risk of not diagnosing Lyme disease is that they get disseminated Lyme disease and it goes on to chronic Lyme disease. And all of you know how terrible that is, right? So this is a terrible, terrible test. So the IDSA says, Infectious Disease Society of America, the dominant medical society for the treatment of infectious disease, says that there is no convincing biological evidence for the existence of symptomatic chronic Borrelia burgdorferi infection among patients after receipt of recommended treatment regimens for Lyme disease. And my response to that is, really? Because in 1989, there is a documented treatment failure that was culture proven. You know, in college, in Logic 101, the question is always posted, how many black swans do I have to find to prove the statement false, quote, there are no black swans, close quote. We got to find one, right? Well, we just found our black swan and it's right there. Well, what about in a mouse model? Well, it's been proven in multiple studies that this bug, Borrelia and its cousins, right? Borrelia burgdorferi and its cousins can live through appropriate antibiotic therapy. In a dog model, it can live through appropriate antibiotic therapy. In a macaque monkey, rhesus monkey model. And here is one specific study where in these rhesus macaque monkeys, Borrelia burgdorferi can withstand antibiotic treatment when administered post-dissemination in primates. And they go on to say, so gosh, maybe we should think about this. Human studies, persistent symptoms have been reported in 25 to 80% of patients with Lyme 2 to 4 weeks after antibiotic therapy. In this study, 40% of patients had persistent infection. The best treatment for chronic Lyme disease is early and efficient treatment of acute Lyme disease, but that's difficult because only about 50% of people have the Lyme rash. And central clearing of that rash is not present in about half of people. And in one series of erythema migrans rashes, they were diagnosed as cellulitis, even though they had other symptoms consistent with Lyme disease. Worse yet is that fewer than 50% of Lyme patients have recall a tick bite. So anybody who has the flu off season should be worked up for Lyme. And anybody who has severe life-altering fatigue, migrating joint pains, migrating muscle pains, memory impairments, mood swings, anxiety, progressing over time, and they live or play in a tick-infested region or a Lyme endemic area should be considered to have tick-borne illness until proven otherwise. So here's something I see all the time. So the patient has an erythema migrans rash, classic bullseye rash, but this might show up between 3 and 4 weeks after exposure, right? So then they have the two-tiered test doesn't show positive until 4 to 6 weeks after exposure. So the patient is diagnosed with an erythema migraine rash. They go to the doctor, they see the rash, they go to the doctor says, yep, that looks like a Lyme rash. Let's get a Lyme test to confirm it. Well, the test, maybe the patient was exposed, 10 days ago, waits, gets the rash, waits a couple of days, shows up at, 10, 12 days into the doctor's office. The doctor says, well, let's confirm with a test, draws the test, sends it off. And because it hasn't been 4 to 6 weeks after exposure, the Lyme test comes back negative. And that patient then is never thought to ever have Lyme because they had a negative test. When in fact, there was an error made by the doctor. This is the big fancy word is iatrogenic. This is doctor caused. And this person goes on to get disseminated disease and chronic Lyme disease. So planes, trains, and automobiles. This is my patient. He lives in Florida. He's originally from Minnesota. He had symptoms consistent with Lyme disease. He had an erythema migrans rash, classic bullseye, showed me pictures of it. He had fatigue, he had joint pains, he had muscle pains, he had sweats. This alone was diagnostic of Lyme disease, but he went to his doctor in Florida who said, yeah, I'm not going to treat you because we don't have Lyme in Florida. And then the doctor refused to do a Lyme test because we don't have Lyme in Florida. And the patient said, yeah, but I have a cabin in northern Minnesota where 2/3 of the tick carry Lyme. Yeah, but we don't have Lyme in Florida. And I want you now to remember that map where there were 2,327 CDC reported cases between 1990 and 2018 in Florida, suggesting 20,000 cases, right? So suspect Lyme in any patient who has these weird symptoms, but also in anybody who lives in or travels to a Lyme endemic area. So let's summarize this part of the talk anyway. There are often host uniquenesses in individuals with chronic disease. I've said this many times, but not the average, but many people who get Lyme disease, they just fight it off. They don't even get antibiotics. They don't even go to the doctor. They just fight it off like it was a cold. Then there's some people who get the illness, they get sick, they go to the doctor for no good reason, they get a course of antibiotics and that makes them better. That's hallelujah. Then there's a people like us, right? Or you guys anyway. And they don't have that normal response. They don't get the acute illness. They just get what I call the dwindles. And they never get any immediate treatment. They get this disseminated form. And why? Well, it's something unique and interesting about you. It's some unique genetic trait. And remember, your genes are not your destinies. Your antecedents, your triggers, your mediators are not your destiny. And then remember that these infectious agents often modify the local and systemic immune response. They display this stealth pathology we've been talking about, and they can remain dormant in the body for months to even years. So now I want to shift to part 2 of the talk, and I want to just talk about one aspect is your limbic system. So the limbic system is this deep brain. It's a switchboard deep in your brain. And this switchboard is really about the interface between your immune system, your hormone system, and inputs from your cognitive and also emotional world. People with chronic illness are almost always locked in fight or flight, and especially people with chronic Lyme, because chronic Lyme is not only a chronic illness, it's a chronic illness where, frankly, you look fine. You don't have a tumor growing out of your face. You look fine. And people tell you that all the time, don't they? They say, gosh, you look fine. You look so good. There's this dramatic scene in Under Our Skin, which I'm sure all of you have seen. There's this beautiful young woman, and she's the party planner for the band U2 or something like that. And she's telling a story, and she says, I asked my friend, how I look. And he or she, whoever it was, looks at her and says, you look beautiful. And her response is, you just can't imagine the pain I'm in right now, right? This is the plight of chronic Lyme. You don't have a convenient diagnosis like heart disease or cancer or something. Instead, you have this wacky thing that the mainstream doctors say doesn't even exist. It's all in your head. You're just crazy. So that, of course, I mean, you get told crazy enough times, you're probably going to start to feel crazy, right? All of my patients doubt their own validity. They go, well, it must be in my head because everybody keeps telling me. Well, no, it's not. Well, again, to the extent there are spirochetes in your head, it's in your head. But this idea of limbic dysregulation results in fight or flight, cold hands and feet, pale or flushed skin, poor memory, brain fog, cognitive problems, angst, nervousness, on edge, anxiety, palpitations, upregulated inflammation, downregulated detoxification, downregulated hormones, everything you can imagine bad, dysfunctional limbic system does to you. So how do we fix it? Well, we fix it with a program we have called Rebalance to Heal. Now, is this going to cure your Lyme? Well, in some cases, it's the thing that cures the Lyme, believe it or not. But generally, what is it going to do? It's going to help your immune response. It's going to help your immune system help you better. And that helps you fight, right? So this is free. We have this on our website at justbewell.info/rebalance-2-heal. Now, we also sell coaching around it, but you don't have to have the coaching. And then, there's my clinic, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So what is Rebalance to Heal? It's this autonomic nervous limbic system balance. And we want to rebalance that so that we can unleash your innate healing response. The limbic system is, again, it's like a switchboard deep in your brain, and the switches get stuck. Think of it like muscle memory. If you've ever played sports, let's say basketball, I don't play basketball, but there's this thing, right? You throw the ball. Well, that's muscle memory. After a while, you throw it 10,000 times and suddenly you just do it. You pick it up and throw it. You can have immune memory too. And the immune memory becomes hyper defensive so that, you start with Lyme disease and then you get beat down to the point where you become hypersensitive. And that's when mold sensitivity comes in. And then you get beat down more. And that's where multiple chemical sensitivity comes in. You get beat down more. And that's where electromagnetic sensitivity comes in, right? You just keep beaten down and beaten down and beaten down. And then the immune memory or the limbic memory comes in where all these switches just get like, hey, you're sick all the time. I'm just going to leave all these switches on all the time. So it leaves you locked in fight or flight. Fight or flight shunts blood to your muscles so that you can fight or run, right? But then by the very fact that it's shunting blood to your muscles, it's shunting blood away from your gut. That means poor digestion, poor absorption, and poor healing of the gut. That predisposes you to leaky gut and to functional malnutrition. Even though you're eating the best diet and taking all the supplements, you're just not absorbing it. Shunting blood away from your galt or away from your gut means you're shunting blood away from your galt, your gut-associated lymphoid tissue. That's 70% of the immune system tissue in your body. That means you're functionally immune suppressed. It leads to chronic inflammation, hormone imbalance, detox stress, energy production problems, and more. Right? So this is just one pathway. This is just the gut pathway. There's other reasons why being in fight or flight is bad. It's bad for your brain. It's bad for your liver, lots of things. So Rebalance to Heal. Here are some popular books that sort of support the ideas in this program. There's The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Bruce is actually was one of my professors in med school. The Bond by Lynn Taggart, Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza, and then Wired for Healing by Annie Hopper. I'm going to show you some papers. So the bold at the top, that's the name of the article, and these are all extracted from the peer-reviewed medical literature. So the effects of stress on immune function, the good, the bad, and the beautiful. So in this series of slides, basically they classify stress as either protective or pathological or regulatory. And so short-term stress is generally protective and helpful. It increases your inflammation, which you want, because inflammation is one of the ways you protect yourself. It increases your immunity and so on. But chronic stress shuts everything off. And it's chronic stress. You're locked in fight or flight. Chronic stress is the problem. So this paper, Positive Emotions, Resilience, Gratitude, and Forgiveness, the Role of Positive Psychology in the 21st Century. Chronic stress does everything bad. It gives you the sense of hopelessness and helplessness, and it can upset your hormone balance and brain chemicals necessary to feel happy, and it can adversely impact your immune system. Gratitude as a psychotherapeutic intervention. Gratitude practice can be a catalyzing and relational healing force, often untapped in clinical practice. In this paper, types of prayer, heart rate variability, and innate healing. So heart rate variability is a way of measuring your autonomic balance. So we're not talking about heart rate variability like between 60 and 100. We're talking about, within your normal heart rate. Let's say your normal heart rate is 60. Within 60, we're talking about millisecond variations beat to beat. So this one, it's 150 milliseconds, and this one it's 158 milliseconds, and this one it's 138 milliseconds apart, right? So it's beat to beat. And by looking at those minuscule little changes beat to beat, we can determine, and believe it or not, the more irregular in terms of heart rate variability, not to the point of being, an arrhythmia, but within normal, the more variance, the healthier. The more static, the more you're in fight or flight. So what they find is that innate healing is stimulated by prayer, and prayer optimizes your heart rate variability. In this study, stress determined through heart rate variability predicts immune function. So these findings show that heart rate variability analysis may be a viable, non-invasive, and inexpensive method to not only index stress, but to predict immune function. Heart rate variability and inflammation and meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is when they take all the papers they can find on the topic and then they analyze them together. So maybe you've got 100 papers with 50 patients each. Well, now you've got 5,000 patients that you're looking at in this meta-analysis, right? And it says here, the conclusion of this paper was that overall, we proposed that indices of heart rate variability can be used to index activity of the neurophysiology pathways responsible for adaptively regulating inflammatory processes. So heart rate variability is a marker of inflammation and immune system. And in this paper entitled The Pulse of Inflammation, Heart Rate Variability and Inflammation Pathways. And what they again tell us is that heart rate variability is probably going to become useful in the same way that other tests are useful for diagnosing diabetes or high blood pressure or things like that. So what the heck? Why am I talking about all this stuff? And what is Rebalance to Heal? It's a 6-step program. The first step is some herbs, because when you're in fight or flight, you are physiologically acting as if you are being chased by saber-toothed tigers. Now, if you are being chased by saber-toothed tigers, you're probably not going to sit down, cross your legs, close your eyes, and meditate, right? You are going to run like hell. So people in fight or flight find it very difficult to meditate. So that's not going to be the first. People say, well, manage your stress, try meditating. Okay, well, get rid of all the saber-toothed tigers and maybe I will. I'm swimming in shark-infested waters. I'm not going to close my eyes and meditate. So some herbs. And then heart rate variability training. There's actually devices to measure heart rate variability. And you can do it with your eyes open. So you don't have to close your eyes and, wonder what that weird sound is behind you, because your senses are so heightened. And then we talk about a sensory soothing kit. I'm going to go into these in more detail. And then once you kind of have those things under control, obviously you need a healthy lifestyle. So unfortunately, when you're ill, a lot of times we use comfort food, right? We use easy things, and we got to find ways to improve our lifestyle. And then a morning and evening ritual, because of the papers that show that things like gratitude actually influence and improve our immune system. And then finally, something I call insight training. So let's look at this. So soothing your limbic system. You know, when you're in fight or flight, we really want to do things that are going to support your autonomic nervous system. So I've selected a couple of herbs, and you can find these at my website if you want to, but one is called ANS Serenity. And this is a Chinese herbal combination that really supports a rebalance of the autonomic nervous system and supports yin. And then there's ANS Relax, which is a Western herbal combination that supports neurotransmitter balance and decreases excitability. And then there's something called Theacalm. Theacalm is L-theanine. L-theanine, I like to call it meditation in a bottle. It's not a sedative. It won't make you sleepy, but it just makes the sharp edges of the world a little more rounded. So you start taking those things, and then you start using heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is a direct measure of your autonomic nervous system balance. This is a biofeedback device. So instead of, like in typical meditation training where you sit there and you close your eyes and maybe you have a watch on, so you're peeking out of the corner of your eye looking at your wristwatch, and you're thinking to yourself the whole time, not be calm, be present. It's, holy crap, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? How do I do this? It doesn't feel right. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I call it the tacky shitties, and that has nothing to do with GI illnesses. It has to do with, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. That's the tacky shitties. It's, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And so it's a way to speed up the process, speed up the learning curve of how to get into this balanced state, because you get feedback from this device. So that we use that, and there's instructions on how to use it. Basically, you get the device. It's called an M-Wave. You can get it from our website. You can get it from HeartMath. HeartMath has done tons of research on this heart rate variability stuff. HeartMath.com. And it just got lights on it. So if the light is red, I better try a different technique, right? I better, if I'm doing this, it's probably not relaxing me. I got to figure out a way to relax, and that's going to bring me into heart rate variability. So then, does it really work? Well, 24% of people in this particular study showed improved focus, 30% improved sleep, 38% improvement in calmness, 46% had a drop in anxiety, 48% a drop in fatigue, 56% a drop in depression. So yeah, it works. And then we do what we call our soothing the six senses. You say, six senses, what are you talking about? Well, this is a soothing kit we're going to create. And our cognitive sense, our internal world, is just as real to our mind as the others. So if we remember a sound or a sight or a smell, it is just as real. In other words, if you're in a functional MRI machine and they say, think about smelling a rose, the exact same areas of your brain will light up as if you were in that same scanner and they handed you a rose to actually smell. So we want to do something to soothe sight and hearing and smell and touch and taste and our cognitive. So we have you think this through, and you want to choose an object to ground you when you're feeling out of balance. So a sight, it's a picture perhaps, right? Some picture that evokes a sense of calm. It might be a loved one, it might be a pet, it might be a scene. Hearing, maybe it's a song, maybe it's a tone, maybe it's, someone's voice. Smell, smell and taste might be combined with like a mint that you can smell and then taste, or an essential oil, or a perfume, or any number of things. Touch, maybe something warm and fuzzy, or some other object that has real deep meaning for you. Taste, a flavor, like a mint or whatever it may be. And then cognitive, some kind of precious memory that you can bring up. So this, a really interesting book about this topic, or at least tangentially about this topic, is called The Warrior's Meditation. It's a grounding where you try to become openly aware with all of your senses, not focused, but openly in relaxed awareness. So that's this part. Then we dive into the 5 modifiable lifestyle factors. We have handouts on this. So as you are building your skill with your M-Wave and your sensory soothing kit, we want to start looking deeply at sleep. And I like to think of sleep like this. If I had a super important meeting in a town 4 hours away, gee, when would I leave? I'd probably leave 5 hours away ahead of time, right? Because I want to be there in plenty of time. Well, you have a really important meeting every single day. It's called waking up. Every day you're going to wake up, and it would be best if you slept 8 hours. Now, you have Lyme. You're not sleeping 8 hours. You're lucky if you're getting 3 hours, right? I know. But we want to give ourselves an opportunity, and we want to do sleep hygiene. We want to take supplements. We want to do what it takes to get sleep. That's like a super high priority. Movement. I can't get from my bed to the bathroom on most days. Okay, well, we want to do the movement we can. So I'm glad you're making it to the bathroom, but we want to move. Now, do you want to move so much? Do you want to go to the gym and run? Probably not, right? You want to do what's called sub-symptom threshold activity. That means you want to do like, if you're really sick, only 50%. If you did all the activity that would make you like crash and burn for 3 days, well, that's obviously too much. You want to do less than half of that amount of energy. If you're, further along on your journey and you're getting better, you could do as much as 80%, but you don't want to ever do that amount that's going to have you crashing and burning for the next several days. Nutrition. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough, right? Get some frozen vegetables. Eat vegetables every day. Are you going to go to the market every day and chop vegetables until the cows come home? No, you're not. But frozen vegetables, they're a really good second choice. So get some vegetables, put them in your diet, maybe have, our emergency meals when we come home and we realize, holy crap, we're starving and we need to eat. It's frozen chicken breasts and frozen vegetables. And you can prepare those 110 different ways, right? Stress, a really good book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And the Don is not his name, it's a title. So that's why it's lowercase. But anyway, really good book about a way of thinking about stress. And then relationships. Brené Brown, if you don't know about her, Google her or go to YouTube and look her up. Braving the Wilderness is a beautiful book about relationships. And then harnessing that power of ritual and gratitude. We have an AM ritual. And again, lots of information about this on our website. 6 activities. Start with, what is my essence? What is my essence today? What is my essence in general, right? And, sometimes you wake up and my essence, frankly, is horseshit, right? That's my essence today. I got out on the wrong side of the bed. I feel terrible. Everything's terrible. Well, when you start to really think it through and try to really dig down to that core, all of that stuff that's happening to you, that's not actually your essence. That's stuff that's happening. So dig down. What is your essence? What is your offering? What do you have to offer the world? Even if it's just witness of the fact that you have chronic Lyme, that's an offering, right? And then with that background of really contemplating my essence and my offering, doing some kind of stream of consciousness, allowing what is in your subconscious to well up into your consciousness. And then ask your question, how am I going to apprehend joy? How am I going to, even with chronic Lyme and feeling the pain and feeling the fatigue and having the fogginess, how am I going to apprehend joy? How am I going to manifest love? And then finally, what do I hold? Maybe 3 things. What do I hold in deep gratitude? I like to tell this story. I got up on the wrong side of the bed and I was grousing and carrying on. And I got to this part. What have gratitude? Gratitude, nothing. It's ridiculous. He sucks. Well, except I don't live in Kosovo during the Civil War. So when I step out my front door, nobody's going to shoot at me. That's pretty good. Come to think of it, it's cold outside and the heater works and the roof is sound. Well, that's pretty good. Truth is, I have breakfast. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. You know, and it just sort of slowly changed my attitude. It's like, God, what a moron. I don't, you know, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. No, I don't have chronic Lyme. You have more things to wade through before you can get to the gratitude. But getting to the gratitude helps your immune system. So that's the AM and PM. And then we call it insight training. And this is a path to deeper insight. It's sort of a non-sectarian, non-religious Zen, if you will. So there's part one is ego insights, right? So there's a, you know, just if you're looking for a book on this, although you don't need the book, but the book, What the Buddha Taught, is a very interesting book on the ego insights. Part two is what we call embodiment insights. And the warrior meditation, as I mentioned earlier, is a really interesting book about these embodiment insights. And then the emotional insights. This is really probably the best book on this, although this is a wild book. The Heart of Zen. It's, I'll just leave it at it's a wild book. And so what do these do? Like the first koan, the first insight is really, can you simply hear? Can you hear without valuation, evaluation, or judgment, right? So the classic thing is ring a bell, right? And hear the bell. Can I just hear the sound without the saying, oh, that bell's out of tune, or that bell's harsh, or that I don't like that sound, or I love that sound? Just hear it. Can you do that? And then, you know, and then it goes step by step by step through all of these little bits and pieces of training until suddenly you have this idea about the ego, who we sort of walk around being, is really just a construct. And, you know, when I say I was talking to myself, who was I talking to? You know, who is it I was talking to when I was talking to myself? So it gets a little bit Zen-ish, but it's really a powerful tool for transforming the way you view the world. So that is the program. Those are the 6 steps. So, you know, there's my clinic, the Rebalance to Heal. Again, it's free on our website, and there it is. The other thing we have that I want to make you guys aware of is we have a year-long program for Lyme, and we have groups of 8. So how does it work? You get an individual intake, an hour-long intake, and then we have monthly medical visits that are with your tribe of 8 people, because group and community matter, just like these groups matter, right? So we harness the wisdom and the power of the group. Then we have weekly and healing intention groups. They're all part of this program. Coaching sessions. All in all, it's about $24,000 worth of our clinic time. But because we do it in groups instead of individually, we can do it for under $3,000. And the website for that is, you see it there, but it's bigger there if you want to just check it out. So anyway, that's the program, Rebalance to Heal. That's my thoughts on Lyme disease in general. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think I left some time for questions. At least I hope I did.
Mute.
Or maybe I should.
Oh, here I am. Hi. Yeah,
hi.
hello. Yeah, hi, I'm back. I just wanted to make sure that I was turned off while you were doing this, so that I wasn't bothering. So everybody, if anybody has any questions, if you can share those in your chat, that would be great. Although I don't know where my chat went. Where's
That
my
probably
chat?
means I need to bring up my chat. Okay.
Here, chat.
So the first question I see is whiteness. Just an empty chat box.
Yeah. Oh. So so we have a thank you, Dr. Sult. I love the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to share the link to that Lyme program, and I'm also going to share the link, if I can figure out how to write it all down, because here it is. I'll share the link to the Limbic System program as well, the Rebalance to Heal. And I'm typing this and I have dyslexia. I can't spell my own name. So these are all real words: rebalance, to heal. And if I misspelled them, just correct the spelling and it should work.
So there's a question that says, does the year of Lyme care include individual treatment dash testing, or is that extra individual cost?
Yeah, great question. So because everybody's coming from a different place, it doesn't include Lyme testing because most people have had that, and either it's been positive or whatever. That can be done extra. What is included is a really comprehensive genetic test. We've selected genetic SNPs that are super actionable. So, SNPs for inflammation and immunity and hormones and energy and all kinds of different stuff. And if you have a SNP that we can't do anything about, I don't care about that, right? I only care about things I can do something about. So we selected ones that we can intervene with nutritionally and whatever. And so that's part of the functional medicine piece. That's part of how we shore up your physiology to help you work better. So the way the program works is you have an hour-long individual intake. So that's when we really dive deep into the nitty-gritty of you. We formulate a plan, we layer onto that. Do we need to add this test or that test or the other test? And you're going to get the genetic test anyhow, it's part of the program. And then we follow up every month with a 2-hour group visit. So it's 8 people, the same 8 people. So you go through your cohort of 8 people. And I literally go person to person to person to person, and we deal with just you. And then things come up, right? So I'm one of the participants and I say, gee, my fingernails turned green. How come? And the next person says, you know what? My fingernails turned green too. How come? And so now we have, instead of the 2 minutes available for a question at the end of a doctor visit, we have like 30 minutes or more to talk about whatever comes up in the group that day. So, and then the other thing that happens, this literally happened not too long ago. We were talking about, it wasn't for Lyme, it was a different group. It was for metabolic syndrome. But one of the women said, I just can't motivate myself to exercise. I need help. And another woman in the group said, I'll exercise with you. And they started being buddies, right? They were exercising together and doing all this stuff. And they came back to the group and she said, I'm so proud I've been exercising and I can prove it. And in the group, this was in the old days when you were allowed to be next to each other, she drops her pants and shows us the big bruise on her butt because she fell while they were running together. So, people share and they support each other. So when you're down, they're going to support you. When you're up, they're going to cheer you. And all of that matters for your immune system. So, and studies show that these small groups are better. They're not worse, they're better. So it's actually a higher level of care to have these small groups and this group of the same people, because you create camaraderie and community and tribe. So that's the program.
And this is all virtual right now, Dr. Sult, correct?
Yep.
So people can be anywhere and be part of this.
Right. Yeah. That's the beauty of it. And a lot of the tests I do these days are just a finger prick, so you can do them at home, just like a diabetic does their finger prick at home. We can do like the most comprehensive Lyme panel available commercially. We can do it on a finger prick that you just drop blood onto a card at home. So it's technology is an amazing thing.
In terms of the heart rate variability testing, is that something that's just done with the little machine that you buy on your own, or is that something that you're doing with something else?
No, that's a little gizmo you buy.
This is the gizmo, okay.
Yeah, so let me show it to you. I can get there quick enough and share my screen, I will do it. And like I said, you can go to Heart Math, the word heart and the word math, all one word, Heart Math. And then M-Wave is the name of the gizmo. And they have them there. They have the inventors of them. I just happen to carry them. And I carry them for, I think, a little bit less than they sell them retail. So I will, if I can remember how to do it, I'll share my screen and show you this little gizmo. So it's not even a big gizmo. It's a little gizmo that looks like this. Should be able to see my screen now, huh? That's a little box. It fits in the palm of your hand. So it's not big. It's like this big, and there's a little clip, and you can actually, this black part right here in the center is a thumb. You can put your thumb on it and it'll read your pulse, but there's also a clip you can put on your ear. So you can just put the clip on your ear and set it someplace where you can see it. And then this thing goes up and down to help you breathe. And then this thing turns colors from red when you're not in good to blue when it's pretty good to green when it's really good. And it's just a way, it's like if you're learning to throw a ball, you throw it and it goes to the right of the target. And oh, I got to aim more to the left. So you throw it and it goes to the left of the target. And oh, I went too far to the left. So you throw it and it goes above the target. Oh, I got to bring it down. And you just keep getting this feedback because you know where the ball is going. Well, this gives you feedback about where your autonomic nervous system is.
And with the use of this machine, do you see this change it in like sort of like just the present moment, or is it sort of a rebuilding of changing that sympathetic to the parasympathetic on a more regular basis?
Both. So these stuck switches, right? We're trying to unstick them. So, and metaphorically, this is WD-40 for those switches. We're learning right now. It feels normal to be in fight or flight because we're in fight or flight all the time.
Yeah.
And so I just read the next question. I'm going to get to that because that's a very important question. But I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
We were talking about the if it's a continuous thing, or is it a buildup of changing from sympathetic to parasympathetic?
So yeah, so right now we think it's normal to be in fight or flight because that's what we're in all the time, right? But this teaches us what parasympathetic feels like. And so we start by doing this, several minutes, maybe 20 minutes at a session. And then once we kind of get it, once we understand how to get into parasympathetic, you just do it for like a couple of minutes, multiple times a day to kind of bring yourself back. So, I like to say stress is maybe you start with a neck in the morning, but by the end of the day, you don't have a neck anymore, right? Because you're all uptight. Well, you keep coming back to the M wave a couple of minutes, multiple times a day to just kind of bring yourself back to parasympathetic. And this particular device is not Wi-Fi. I chose it for that. They have other devices that are Wi-Fi if you want to use it with your cell phone or something. They have some that you plug into your cell phone, so they're not Wi-Fi. They have a box that is Wi-Fi. This isn't Wi-Fi. It's wired. It plugs in. It connects to your ear with a wire.
There was a question prior to that. Which test to determine EBV? Is micronutrient testing necessary?
So almost every lab will check for Epstein-Barr virus. The question is, do you have current or past Epstein-Barr? So a current infection, you will have elevated IgG, whereas in a past infection or a dormant infection, you'll have IgM. So, a lot of times you'll get a test and they'll measure both IgG and IgM and you'll have both. Well, that is evidence of a chronic recurrency. In other words, you have chronic dormant colonization, if you will, that every once in a while is becoming active. And that's where you're getting the recurrence of the IgG. And that's why, unlike Western blots, we'll often see the IgG and the IgM both positive. And that's because it's a chronic infection is not really continuously chronic. It's an infection that's sequestered away in those, cysts or whatever, or the hiding places. And then it bubbles out once in a while and causes another immune response. And so you get some more IgG and the IgM just sticks around. I think that answered the question. I'm not sure.
Another question. You talked about Lyme getting into the brain. If you have symptoms of neuro-Lyme, do you treat that differently than just regular Lyme?
Well, to some degree, you gotta get the whatever you're trying to do into the brain, right? So If you're treating with herbs that don't cross the blood-brain barrier or antibiotics that don't cross the blood-brain barrier, you're not going to get a hold of the neuro Lyme. The interesting thing is that a lot of people who think they have neuro Lyme actually don't. They're just so fatigued that their brain doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying that neuro Lyme doesn't exist. It does exist, but for the majority of people, they don't have neuro Lyme. For those who do, we want to choose. So like, as an example, I use biocidin from Botanical Research, the liposomal form. So it's LSF, I think it's called biocidin LSF. And because it's liposomal, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And it's a very good herbal product for not only managing biofilms, but also killing bugs. So, and there are other techniques as well. But yeah, you have to treat it. You have to understand what you're trying to do. And if you're using antibiotics that won't cross, or antimicrobials that won't cross the blood-brain barrier, you're not going to get done what you need done.
Is your program for people with active infections or mostly for those with persistent symptoms after comprehensive treatment has been completed?
Yes. So you can have, there's so much going on with chronic Lyme, right? You can have chronic infection. You can have symptoms that maybe are the result of the infection, but the infection is gone now, right? So maybe it's an autoimmune response to the bugs. Maybe it's just a chronic upregulation of inflammation and autoinflammation response for the bugs. Maybe it's the ravages of the prior treatment. Maybe it's just that your microbiome is so disordered from all the antimicrobials and so on that needs to be rebuilt. Or maybe it's something else altogether, right? So there's lots going on with this whole chronic tick-borne thing. And the group is to really dive in and figure out which it is for you individually. So it's for all of those. So as an example, some of the people in some of the past groups have actually, we've determined that the Lyme isn't an issue anymore, but now they got really huge mold issues. And we're talking to them about mitigating their house and, HEPA filters and UV lights and all kinds of goofy stuff that don't have much to do with Lyme, but it's the same symptoms complex. And that's what we determined. They came in as, I have chronic Lyme, and they did. But now the Lyme is kind of managed, but now they have mold sensitivity, or maybe once we get the molds under control, the Lyme will rebloom, who knows? But as far as we can tell, they don't have active Lyme infection anymore. So, the thing is, you have to have enough humility to continuously be asking yourself, what am I doing wrong? So when I say to somebody, this is what I think, it's only what I think right now. And when you come back and tell me that everything I told you didn't work, I'm going to have to say, oh, okay, well, let's try again. Because if I just say, oh, well, it's your fault it didn't work because you didn't take every single pill exactly the way I said, which so many of my patients have heard, that's not helping you. That's just protecting my ego, right? I have to be continuously searching for how I'm wrong, not patting myself for how I'm right. How I'm right, that's like the price of admission. Good, I'm glad I was right, but why are you still sick? Let's find the next level and the next level and the next level. So it's continuously digging.
Another question, how is neural Lyme diagnosed?
Well, that's an excellent question because nobody really knows. There are differences in the way people respond to a CD57 and a C4A between musculoskeletal Lyme and neuro Lyme. Some people will do a neuroquant, which is a kind of a CT scan that measures volumes. So there's lots and lots of, and then there's just symptoms, right? Like I do a lot of neurocognitive testing. I use a company called Cambridge Brain Science, and it's all online stuff. So they have all these goofy games that you play, and they're highly specific. They tell us which part of your brain is working and which part isn't. So we do that. I also do EEG brain mapping. So, you obviously have to come to the office to do that, but the Cambridge Brain Science stuff you can do online. If the Cambridge Brain Science stuff doesn't give us the final answer and, you know, we sent off a CD57, a C4A and C3A and whatever, and they don't give us the answer, we may do EEG brain mapping. We may send you off for a quant, you know, a neuroquant, which is a CT scan. So there, or a SPECT scan. There's lots of different ways you can do it, but there's no one test that says, aha, it's neuro Lyme. I wish there was. That would be awesome. And then I
What
also,
room? Oh,
yeah,
go
room
ahead.
air, you know, HEPA 13. So I've tried everything. I really like the multi-layered. So you want to have a you know, a large particle screen followed by a HEPA, and there's various levels of HEPA. True HEPA is actually the lowest level. There's HEPA. You want to really have HEPA 13. HEPA 13 is what they use in operating rooms. So then a HEPA 13 filter, then a carbon filter, which helps get rid of VOCs, you know, volatile organic chemicals. And then maybe even more recently, especially with the COVID kind of situation, you can use UV light on that last layer, which actually activates something in the charcoal to make free radicals that kill off, not ozone, which kill off microbes. And that can be particularly helpful for people with mold illness and stuff. So, you know, there are a lot of these on the market. And how come the name is escaping me right now? But I just had it on my, I just bought a couple of them for my office actually. But anyway, so you're looking for a HEPA 13 and with or without ions and with or without UV, but not ozone. I don't think ozone is a good thing to be producing in your home.
Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to give you a little bit of time here to type in your next questions. While I do that, I'm just going to remind everybody about the support meeting next week, Tuesday, the 16th. We'll have a support meeting. That information is on our website and on our Facebook pages. And we will have a presentation meeting next March 9th with Dr. Sam Shore. So we would love to have you there. Anybody have any more questions? Oh, we do. Any valuable tests that help determine tick-borne treatment endpoint?
Two things. Let me, I'll answer that, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to put this Apollo filter in here because that's the, not the Helios, the Apollo. No, that's the one. That's not the one. There is no specific test that tells you for sure you're done. If you're, you know, there's the CD57. If your CD57 is up above 150, then I'm thinking your immune system is starting to work in a pretty nice way. If your C4A is well below, say, you know, 2000, I'm going to be thinking that your complement system is working pretty well. There's the, it's called Smart UV. That's a really good air purifier. There's good chance that your systems are working well. And then it's a trial, as we used to call it when I worked in an ICU, it's a trial of life. You know, we extubated people, took the tube out of their mouth and everything and saw what happens. So sometimes we think people are doing really good. So we stop treatment and we see what happens over the next few months. And if they crash and burn, we were wrong, right? But if they continue to do well, we monitor them. And as long as they're doing well, we're happy. Now, the unfortunate thing is the more well you feel, the less likely you are to do your basic healthy stuff. And most people with chronic Lyme are people that no matter how far along in treatment they are, they're going to have to pay particularly close attention to a really healthy lifestyle in order to maintain their wellness. So what often happens is a year out, people will say, you know, I was doing fantastic. And then I went back to eating junk food and fast food and, staying up late watching goofy movies, and guess what? I feel crappy now. And so we go back at it again and retreat.
All right, one more question. How is your Rebalance program different than DNRS with Annie Hopper?
It's just a different program. It's different because we do different things. Annie is a behavioral person, right? So it's more, hers is based more in like behavioral psychology kinds of things. And ours is based more in this heart rate variability. And then we do these insight cones. So it's more of a Zen practice. They get to the same place. I think that ours is cheaper. I think that's a plus. But I think her program is really great. I have had several patients use her program with really good success. And you'll notice that I put in the notes her book, right? Wired to Heal.
Oh, a couple more things here. Big thank you. Another big thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and yeah, so thank you, Doctor. So if everybody wants to come back on, if you can turn your cameras on, turn your speakers on, your thing on, so we can all say thank you and good to Dr. Sult. It takes a little while. Everybody's got to find their little buttons.
Got to find the button. I know that's the hardest part.
Got to find the buttons.
The problem with computers is they almost always do what you ask them to.
I know. It's terrible.
It is.
All right. Well, are most people unmuted here?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can everybody get a big round of applause for Dr. Sult?
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very
Yeah,
good.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sult. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all the work you do for Lyme patients here in Minnesota and across the country. We appreciate it. We know how hard your work is and how important you are to all of us. So thank you again. And I'm wishing everybody here some to stay warm and to stay as healthy as you can in this climate, and enjoy the sunshine when it's out, even if it's just by looking out your window. So I hope we see you next week. And if you ever have any questions, remember you can reach out to us through our website at mnlyme.org if you're looking for some help or some support. Gail, our support person, her phone number is on there. If you just need some individual support, she'll be happy to speak with you. And Mick Behrens-McCardle is there for caregivers if there's any caregivers out there who are looking for some individual support. So thank you so much. Everybody have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.